Think about the last time you found yourself endlessly swiping on your phone in a dark room. Was that a conscious choice driven by your own desire? Or was your thumb just executing a mathematical equation you didn't even know you were part of? In the late 19th century, a psychologist named Edward Thorndike proposed something called the law of effect. He noticed a simple pattern. If an action is followed by a satisfying consequence, an organism is highly likely to repeat it. Decades later, B.F. Skinner took Thorndike's observation and turned it into a rigid, measurable science. This diagram illustrates the Skinner box. By confining an animal in a highly controlled environment equipped with a lever, a food dispenser, and an electric grid, researchers could track exactly how behavior changed when specific rewards or punishments were introduced. This illustration outlines the core mechanism of operant conditioning. It shows that voluntary behavior isn't driven by free will at all. Instead, it is entirely shaped by its consequences, specifically the addition or removal of pleasant or unpleasant stimuli. We like to think we're infinitely more complex than a rat pressing a lever for a food pellet, but from the moment we are born, we operate inside invisible Skinner boxes, constructed by our society. The most basic tool of operant conditioning is positive reinforcement. This occurs when you add a rewarding consequence immediately after an action, ensuring that specific baseline behavior happens again. We are introduced to this very early on through token economies in the classroom. Teachers hand out stickers or points when a student completes an assignment or sits quietly. These are secondary reinforcers, meaningless on their own, but valuable because the child learns they can be traded later for a tangible prize. When we graduate and enter the workforce, the environment looks different, but the math is exactly the same. Employee recognition programs, quarterly bonuses, and public praise are just the grown-up version of the sticker chart. They are calculated levers pulled by management to increase your productivity. Giving someone a bonus for hitting a sales target works well if they already know how to sell. Simple positive reinforcement is great at increasing behaviors we already possess, but it completely fails to explain how we learn entirely new, complex skills. So how do you reinforce an action that a subject doesn't even know how to perform yet? You can't reward a behavior that never happens. The solution is a process called shaping. Instead of waiting for the perfect final action, you reward successive approximations. You break the target behavior down into tiny micro-steps and reward the subject for getting slightly closer to the final goal each time. Parents use shaping naturally when teaching children complex routines. You don't start by demanding 3 hours of flawless homework. First, you praise the child just for sitting at the desk. Then, you withhold that praise until they actually open their book. You demand slightly more effort for every subsequent reward. Because animal trainers can't verbally explain what they want an animal to do, they rely entirely on shaping to construct behavior from scratch. Skinner himself demonstrated this by training pigeons to read color-coded panels and execute specific actions for food. He would drop a pellet when the bird simply turned toward the panel, then only when it walked toward it, and finally only when it pecked the correct color. This identical shaping process is how trainers build highly unnatural physical feats in large marine mammals, rewarding micro-movements in the water until a massive, coordinated jump is finally achieved. Human expertise and animal spectacle share the exact same architecture. Every complex skill we witness is a massive stack of tiny, sequentially rewarded fragments. But constant rewarding is exhausting. How does a carefully shaped behavior become a permanent, self-sustaining habit once the constant stream of rewards stops? This graph maps a variable ratio schedule, a form of intermittent reinforcement. If a reward is unpredictable, meaning the subject doesn't know how many actions it takes to get the next payout, they never experience satiation. The uncertainty drives a persistent, obsessive repetition of the behavior. While intermittent rewards keep us hooked, there is a darker side to behavioral engineering that traps us even more effectively: negative reinforcement. It's important to clarify that negative reinforcement is not punishment. Punishment adds a penalty to stop a behavior. Negative reinforcement increases a behavior by actively removing a painful or aversive stimulus. We see this mechanism clearly in drug dependence. Addiction often begins with the positive reinforcement of an initial high. But the addiction becomes a permanent fixture when physical and psychological withdrawal sets in. Once withdrawal begins, the brain prioritizes the drug because it instantly terminates physical agony. This makes consumption a negatively reinforced loop, driven by the biological necessity of escaping withdrawal. Operant conditioning is a sliding scale. It starts out as a simple tool for teaching tricks, but its mechanics can easily escalate into an invisible trap that hijacks human autonomy entirely. Operant conditioning provides the invisible scaffolding for our educational systems, our modern economy, and our most persistent personal vices. It is unsettling to realize that so many of our choices are not really choices at all, but the inevitable outputs of an environment that is constantly, silently programming us. But understanding the strict mechanics of these invisible levers actually gives us a psychological advantage. Identifying the negative reinforcement loop behind a bad habit creates a deliberate choice point where there was previously only an automatic reflex. This recognition allows us to consciously alter the environment or the consequences, finally interrupting the cycle. By spotting the consequences that shape our actions, we stop being the subjects of the experiment. We finally become the architects of our own behavior.